All right, we are live. Mr. McCormick, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Hey guys, we're excited to do this webinar with everybody today. Today we're going to talk about how pros invest in foreclosures, and I've got Thomas, who has recently joined our team, a pro at investing in real estate. Thomas, can you give us an introduction to yourself?
Sure. So, like Curtis said, my name is Thomas McCormick. I'm a realtor, I'm an investor. I do long and short term rentals, but specific to our conversation today, I first met Curtis along with Aaron, the COO and CEO of Roddy's Foreclosure Services, and I came to them as a foreclosure flipper. And I talked to them. We eventually started a partnership back in 2020 where they would invest my deals and I would put them together. And after working with them, I learned that there was a big jump in difference between what I was doing and how they were doing because Roddy's has been doing this since the 60s. So what Curtis and I talked about was some of these tips might be applicable to other people just starting out or maybe even the seasoned veterans. Show you a couple tweaks that might make your business totally different and way more effective.
Man, what an introduction, Thomas. So Thomas, we're excited to have Thomas as part of the team. You'll be seeing a lot more of him on these webinars, specifically when we're talking about investing in real estate and then some of the tools that Roddy's offers for that. But specifically for today, again, we're going to talk about how to invest, how the pros are investing in real estate right now, especially during these weird times where it's a little bit more competitive. Um, so um, and again, my name is Curtis Roddy. I'm the COO of Roddy's companies. We've got Lead Propeller, Roddy's Foreclosure Listing Service, and Real Estate Rockstar. So we're excited to be here today. So, Thomas, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I think the best way to probably get everyone started is maybe if you want to talk a little bit about what the major hurdles are that people should expect when investing in foreclosures.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we get ultimately, we've got three questions that come up. We've got people asking me, how do I get money? And how do I underwrite the deal? And then how do I make sure that the deal I'm getting is an appropriate deal? So really, we break that down into capital and underwriting, and then that underwriting is really deal analysis, drives, and title. So um, I've been doing this my entire life. I've learned that the best foreclosure investors are those with the best information that do the best job at underwriting. Typically, what happens is you get better at your underwriting and more capital becomes available to you.
Unless you want me to put this here, just
Right. And so when you're trying to get, for me at least, I can speak on trying to get some of that capital. That was the most daunting part of what I was doing because when I first started out with foreclosures, obviously, like a lot of you listening right now, I didn't have the track record. So what we ended up doing was, or what I ended up doing is I learned after going to so many auctions, the real secret, the real pro secret is most of the people out there bidding on the houses weren't using their own money.
just
Yeah.
And that was kind of daunting, but at the same time, it's really difficult. But because it's difficult, it's a good thing because since it's such a big barrier to entry, it actually keeps so many investors out of it. It means the competition is less, which allows you to eventually get homes at a bigger discount, so your profit's even larger.
Yeah, so I mean, what we found is is that the biggest once you've got that underwriting down, the biggest barrier to entry is going to be the capital. So like Thomas was saying, not all investors, most pro investors are not actually investing with their own cash. They've got people working. They're either with partners or with other banks. And so again, um, Thomas, can you talk about how what that process should be like to getting funding or to finding that capital without a track record?
Yeah, so without a track record, it's pretty difficult. But after reading the book Bidding to Buy by our CEO, one of the things that he recommends is he says, listen, you need to start calling your shots. So what does calling your shots mean? It means actually coming up with the data and doing the underwriting yourself before auction ever happens so that you can point out to future investors, look, here's the house, here's how much we think it's going to cost to renovate, and here's the profit that we're expecting at the end. And what's so powerful about this is if you call this before it all happens and it ends up happening exactly like you said, and maybe the profit margin is even bigger, that's going to build up that track record without you needing any capital. For example, me personally, I would take some of this information, I would upload it on YouTube. It'd be time stamped probably a week or two before auction so that when I send deals to investors, I'd be able to say, listen, the whole machine is working here. The only thing we're missing is the fuel, which would be the capital that I was hoping to get. But the problem I ran into was when you actually go to auction, oftentimes there are 3 or 4 auctioneers who are bidding out properties at the same time. So you're standing there, you're trying to be at each one, but you hear two properties that you want to bid on, both being auctioned off at the same time on different ends of the courtroom steps, or the courthouse steps rather. So me as a rookie at the time, I had to choose. And even though I put in all that work in the underwriting, really, ultimately, I could only get the information on one. But after talking a little bit with Curtis and Aaron, I realized that they had a system that allowed you to be everywhere at once. So something that's actually offered through Roddy's is we have our struck off list. And with that, we track every single foreclosure that comes through Texas. And we actually share with you exactly what those homes sold for. And if I had that when I started, I would have been wildly more successful in actually being able to prove the points I was trying to make. But that's just how it worked here. Maybe there's a service in your state that does it just as well, but we've been doing it a long time here and it works out. And I think it's probably a good time to transition now that we have the capital. Maybe talk a little bit about title and why that's so important, part of the underwriting.
Yeah. So I mean, title is so important because you want to know what you're buying, right? Like, I think there's two very scary things about buying an auction. It's not knowing the condition of the property and not knowing the condition of the title. And so there's, you can either buy you can buy property with good title or bad title. I mean, I've heard lots of stories of investors out there. They'll get really excited, like, hey Thomas, hey Curtis, I just got a great deal on a house. I bought it for $20,000. I think it's worth like $200,000. And then we go back to the Roddy insights or the Roddy title analysis, and we're like, well, I'm sorry to tell you, that's actually the second lien. There's another lien on the property. And so it's really important to know what you're buying. Sometimes it's a great deal. Sometimes you buy that $20,000 second lien, you get access to the property, and then you also you still have equity baked in, even though that first lien is still there. And so it's super important to know exactly what you're buying from a title perspective, and then also what type of title you're looking at.
So Curtis, as a newer investor, could you explain a little bit what a second lien would be and maybe why that'd be a bad idea if a second lien was going to auction?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've got at least in Texas, the way the chain of title works out is that you've got your senior liens, which is typically your first lien. So when me or Thomas go to buy our initial house, we get a normal mortgage on it. That's going to be a first position lien. Let's say 5 years later down the road, I refinance, or I want to take some equity out. I might get what's called a junior lien or a cash out lien, and that's going to be a second lien. And so that lien does not have all of the rights that first lien has. So in Texas, it's first to right is first and right. So if you write the lien first, then you have all of the rights associated with that. If you write the lien second, then you have all of the rights over, or you have essentially seniority over the second, the third, and the fourth position liens that might be there. But usually what we advise newer investors to look for is to make sure that you're buying a first lien or a first position lien. There's also other junior lien types out there, like HOA liens. So those, you can actually lose your house if you don't pay your HOA dues. Those typically are going to be junior liens. And then they've got, in Texas at least, the tax liens are what we call super senior liens. And so those actually take precedent over first and second position liens.
And when you say take precedence, that means?
Yeah, so if a super senior lien, let me go back up. So whatever lien is getting foreclosed on, so let's say the first position lien is getting foreclosed on, it wipes out every other lien junior to that. So if the first lien gets foreclosed on and there's still a second, third, and junior lien on that property, that second, third, and junior lien would all get wiped out with that sale. If a second lien gets foreclosed on, the second, third, and junior lien would get foreclosed on or be wiped out, but that first lien would still be there. And so with a super senior lien, it would take precedent or wipe out that first, second, third, and junior liens that could be with a particular property.
So when you're going to auction, aren't you actually bidding on a house?
You are in theory bidding on a house, but you're actually bidding on a particular mortgage instrument, which is typically the deed of trust, that gives the bank the right to foreclose on a property. And so in that deed of trust, the deed of trust says, it has a rider in there that says, hey, in the event of default on this loan, we can foreclose on Exhibit A, and Exhibit A is always going to be the legal description of the property that we kind of refer to as the property being foreclosed on.
So I know what we're going to talk about today, some of the underwriting, and then of course the capital. A lot of those have DIY solutions. Is title something that you would recommend to anybody to do?
The title can be tricky, right? So we typically recommend that new investors stay away from researching your own title. You definitely can. You can go to the courthouse, or you can go. A lot of counties have county records online. You can research the properties and kind of do your own title. But if this is your first time doing it, or if you don't have a lot of experience researching title, we always recommend that you get a title analysis. You can get that through us. You can get that through anybody. Roddy's Insights provides title analysis on all of the properties in that particular county. And our researchers have been doing this, for most of them for 10 plus years. And so sometimes more seasoned investors will do their own research, but it depends.
Yeah, I think something I learned when I first came on with you and Aaron is I was trying to teach myself, right? Any real estate investor out there has a DIY bone. You're the same person who tried to paint your walls or maybe change out the cabinets or do different flooring. So I was like, hey, I can do any of this stuff. So I started trying to do some of the title search. And I remember a time, Curtis, I don't know if this sticks out to you or not, but I sent you a property that I had done all the analysis on, all the underwriting. I'm like, it's a perfect house. We need to do it. And, you're asking for a big sum of money. I was asking for between, 300 and 350. I don't remember what it was exactly, but I said, we need to close on this property. And Curtis just types back, hey, you sure you got the title right on this? Which immediately I knew, okay, hang on, I need to take a step back. Something's wrong here. But even though it didn't happen all the time and I got 9 out of 10 right, getting that 1 out of 10 wrong would have cost us that 300 to 350. So I would say as a newer investor, as a rookie, definitely not some kind of DIY solution that you'd like to do. But the pros and what shifted the way I thought about this, and Curtis has touched on it a couple times here, is we provide all this information in our Roddy's Insights package. So we give you entire counties and we run all the title search for every single one of the properties coming to auction so that is this a clean title or there's some liens attached to it, just kind of Curtis, he went over. But to really understand this, I think a better explanation of what Roddy's Insights is important. So there are a couple heavy hitters.
Before we talk about Roddy Insights, I want to answer a question because we got Veterans Buys Houses has a question about liens. Said, so regardless of all other liens, you should only be concerned with the first one. Did I understand that right? So yeah, let me reiterate that. So you don't want to just be concerned with the first one. You want to be concerned with all of the liens on the property. Anytime other liens are on the property, there can be other situations that come up. So even if I'm buying a first position lien, if there's a second lien on the property, I want to at least know that that's there, because when I go to flip that house or to refinance it I have to run that through title. I want to make sure that I'm aware of that lien being there and telling the title company exactly what happened. There's a lot of title companies out there that they'll see that second lien and they won't necessarily have, understood that there was a foreclosure and that second lien had fallen off. So just want to make sure, if we always say, hey, if there's a second lien on there, that's a little bit of a yellow flag. We want to make sure we know it's there. And then we want to be very sure that it's a second position lien. If really what the big thing that we're talking about that a lot of investors are scared about is making sure they're buying the right property or the right mortgage or the lien. So an example would be, this happens probably once a month in one of our counties, is a property will actually have two mortgages on it, and they're both being foreclosed on at the same time. So one might have document number 2001 and another one would have document number 2007. You want to make sure, and let's assume that 2001 document is the senior lien or the first position lien. You want to make sure that whenever that trustee starts crying that bid, that you're buying 2001 and not 2007. So I hope that do you think that answers the question, Thomas?
I think that does a pretty good job, and also shows just how complicated this can be if you don't know exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and we don't have too much time to talk about title. We're actually going to do a whole webinar on title and things that can come up. But Anthony asks if all liens should be listed with the county. Could there be an undocumented lien? Yes, there can be an undocumented especially if there's something new that just happened. So let's say, in theory, I could go get a mortgage 2 days ago, and it probably won't show up at the county today. So yes, there's things that can happen. Typically, it doesn't happen. That's again, typically what we'll recommend is they use a title expert or some sort of title analysis. Again, I'm going to say Roddy's Insights, and then before the auction, just make sure you don't see anything recorded. So we'll go back to the source and check title again. So that's kind of a short answer to that. Again, we'll do another webinar just for title in the future. We'll actually have some of our title experts come onto the show. But Thomas, I know you were so excited about Roddy's Insights. Thomas gets fired up about Roddy Insights, and I got to let him talk about it right now.
So initially, I was tracking foreclosures all over the country and looking at different companies who did the work and got the list out. And when I first came on Roddy's, they were offering a product that I had never seen before. And that's what initially drew my interest there outside of us investing together, Curtis and I. And the story behind Roddy's Insights is, if you've ever been to auction, you know that there are like 2 or 3 just figures that everyone knows. They're almost celebrity at the auction, and they're the ones who are bidding on every property. Well, here in the state of Texas, 80% of them buy their lists directly from us and buy their information directly from us. And at some point earlier this year, we started getting calls from them saying, hey, listen, is there any way we could buy this information in bulk from you? So instead of buying one title at a time or one property drive where we drive, take pictures, and take notes of the properties, these investors were asking for everything. Well, that was a pretty tall order for us. And so internally we talked about it and said, hey, is this a good idea or is it not? So we tested this tool out and we started getting more phone calls. And the reason we started getting more phone calls is because those auction celebrities, they weren't reading from the same list that all the other Roddy subscribers were. They were looking on their phones, they're looking at their iPads, and people started noticing things looked a little different. They had access to all the photos. They had access to all the notes. Instead of just pulling up a Google image of a house that was probably taken a year or 2 ago, they had pictures from the week before auction of the current condition of the property. So word started spreading pretty quickly. People kept calling us asking, hey, what is this package? How can we buy it? And internally, we would call it our heavy hitters package. And so we started reaching out to the different people that we knew were heavy hitters and say, hey, listen, people are using this over here in your neighbor county. Why don't you be the first to use it here? So it started pretty quickly spreading, and we just said, hey, we need to give a public offering of this and just see how it's perceived by the public. So that's how Roddy's Insights was first created. It was made for the heavy hitters, but now we're releasing this publicly as a product that we sell, so that for one price, you get all the title searches, you get all the drives, you get all the pictures and notes that we have on every property going to auction, taken the week before auction. So that's really why we're here and what's going to give you the real edge when you're going to bid against somebody who's just trying to piece together their own spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's a great background on that, Thomas. I think the other thing that we want to make sure we touch on is that another big feature of Roddy's Insights is that it's not just for Texas or local real estate investors. Really, it was built so that even an out-of-state investor or somebody on the other side of the state could invest with confidence in Texas or in that particular area where the margins are higher, for example. So, for example, we know California auctions, there's been a lot of controversy in California about the foreclosures and evictions, and it's nearly impossible to get a foreclosure in California, at least in Keep It. I won't talk about the California foreclosures right now because I'm hot about Texas foreclosures. But a lot of investors in California are like, hey, where can I buy a foreclosure now? And really the answer is Texas. Texas, in my opinion, is the best market that has the most advantageous foreclosure process for in-state or out-of-state investors. And so our insights reports, again, without an out-of-state investor or somebody on the other side of the state having to drive and fly a team into let's say Dallas, spend 3 or 4 days driving properties, and then spend 3 or 4 days running title, it gives those investors the ability to just have all of that information right there. So we don't want geography to keep our investors from bidding on profitable properties.
Yeah. So just what Curtis was saying about the drives, I think that's the final part of what we wanted to talk about in terms of underwriting. And this is, of course, the most time-consuming part of what you're going to have to do whenever you're trying to bid at auction. And that's just because, I mean, if you ever create a map for yourself, there's no way that you can work a day job and then go and see every foreclosure that's coming. And as we know, there are even more coming to market soon. So we've actually started to replace quite a few of our investors' drive teams, and we've been able to offer them for a package price with Roddy's insights. But the reason that drives are so important are a couple things. When I drive properties, here's what I look at. The first thing I always say is the property occupied? That's something you 100% need to know. You don't want to buy a property with somebody in it, because the process to remove them from the home is difficult. It can be long. Even if you're in a state like Texas or Georgia who favor landlords, that takes forever. And that's your money that you have sitting in that property that's just accruing interest over time. So I look at that. And then the bigger part of that is drives are where you get your rehab estimates. So people who go to auction who are just looking at, Google Earth to see, hey, what does a property look like? You're not going to know the current condition.
Yeah,
Curtis, do you have any stories of
no. I mean, you talk about that, like people buy houses at the auction looking at the Zillow pictures. It blows me away. Like I'll be at an auction and I see the trustee say, this trustee will say, here's the legal description. And then one of our employees will call out the address. And then somebody will pull up the Google image of it. I'm like, are you kidding me? You have no idea what that looks like now. I think my favorite story is probably we've got two big like fire stories, right? So one was, we drove a property the month before auction. It didn't get foreclosed on, but the property was actually posted for the next auction. And initially, our team was like, "Hey, we don't need to drive that. We've already got pictures of it, right?" We figured it's probably in the same condition. It was vacant at the time. Luckily, we ended up driving it 3 days before auction, and we found a big hole in the side of the house where a car had actually driven through it, and then started to fire. It was a pretty crazy thing. Had we not driven that property, though, we wouldn't have known that. If we would have looked at Google Street View, we would not have known that. We've actually got a post on our Facebook somewhere. I think Thomas might have put it up, or maybe Aaron put it up, where the property was posted for foreclosure. We actually have the Google Street View image of the day before, or the day it was posted. There's a house there. Everything's great. It's about 30 days before the auction. The next day, we drove the property. And then we take a picture and there is literally nothing there. The city had condemned the property and demolished it before the auction. So it's really important not only to make sure you drive the properties, but give yourself, a couple of days before the auction to make sure you drive the properties and know what the actual condition is the day of foreclosure. Well, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll use Roddy's insights, or we'll recommend that people use Roddy's insights, narrow their list down to the list that they're going to bid on. If they have time, drive that property the morning of. So if you have 5 properties, you might drive by those properties before the auction just to make sure you know what you're getting.
So what do you think? You think now's a good time to take some questions?
Yes, it looks like we've got a couple.
Yeah, that's the reason. Okay, I've got a question for Thomas specifically. Okay, all right, Eric, what do you got? Let's see. Since you are a solo investor, how can you find homes before they go to foreclosure? So I actually have a great answer for you, Eric. So if you're tracking the market now, you know that probably the biggest trend in real estate are the iBuyers, right? Coming to try to purchase up all the properties. So they're all online. And we actually, one of the companies that we own is Lead Propeller. It allows you to create your own website to channel some of those online leads to come to you before they make it over to Zillow. So this webinar is not about that. Surely we'll have one soon, Eric. But we appreciate the question. And if you're interested, go check out leadpropeller.com and we'll get you set up with a website so you can start getting those leads before they go to foreclosure.
Awesome. And it looks like we got another question from Chris.
Hey, Thomas McCarthy. What advice would you give to someone just starting out in real estate investing? What I would say is just the experience of what I know. So you need to recognize that you don't know everything and that you need to surround yourself with the people who know what they're talking about. That's exactly how I got connected with Curtis and Aaron. And so for me, they were out in Texas, so I traveled back and forth to be able to learn from them. But for you specifically, I would say maybe go to a real estate meetup, or I know there are quite a few in the area. I'm not sure where you're from, Chris, but find somebody who is where you want to be in the next 10 years and just stay close to them. Buy coffee for them, whatever it takes. Get a mentor.
Awesome. And we got Shay has asked us, what are some ways to get money to buy properties at auction? And Thomas kind of touched on this at the beginning, right? So that's one of the biggest barriers to entry is getting that capital to go to auction. And unfortunately, right now you have to have all cash at auctions to buy a property. And so a couple of ways that I would suggest if you don't have the capital to bring to auction, one of the ways I would suggest is to either find a partner, find an equity partner that's willing to do the deal. I know when we do equity deals, and we've had people approach us for equity deals, the way we approach it is half the deal is the work and underwriting and the analysis, which is 50% of that job, and the other half is the equity that you put into it. So there's a lot of partners out there that if you say, hey, here's the deal I have, kind of like Thomas said, he recorded YouTube videos, he had a lot of data. He made us as the investing partner feel great that he knew what he was talking about with those properties. And so do your research, put together your analysis, and then find a partner. We can always help you find partners out there too. And the other way, which is kind of unheard of in Texas at least, is there are auction financing companies out there. We're not an auction financing company, but we can put you into contact with a company out there that does do auction financing in the state of Texas. To my knowledge, there's only one or two out there doing that now. So if you'll email us or get on Facebook or call our office, we can put you in contact with the proper person. Thomas, anything else you'd add to that?
I thought we got some great questions. In terms of what we're talking about right now, we have the advantage being in Texas because we are able to purchase, Roddy's list first. But again, just to reiterate what Curtis said, it's not just built for Texas investors. The information is good enough to where you could be comfortable sitting on your couch in Atlanta or maybe out in LA and feel like you did all the drives yourself. It is a total turnkey company where you're at the head and you get to call the shots in your PJs, just looking at the numbers. So you're not doing all the work and you can actually start winning properties in Texas instead of having to invest in some of the more competitive markets where you might be.
We got another question that came in and said, basically, when you win the bid, you don't just get the house, but also the liens. Yes. So that's probably a good way to understand title, right? So if you buy a property, you're buying that lien, you're essentially getting the property. The lien gives the right to foreclose on the property. And so you're getting that property. Now, if there's junior liens associated with it or other taxes or anything like that, you are buying that too. If you're buying, junior liens will fall off in Texas, but if there's taxes associated, you're going to inherit that. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you get that first lien. Or if you're buying a second, there's nothing wrong with buying a second lien. It's not like, hey, if you bought that $10,000 pool lien on a $500,000 house that has a $300,000 first position lien on it, it's not a bad deal. You still own the property, but you also inherit any senior liens or taxes associated with it. So you want to make sure that are there going to be taxes owed? So Roddy's Insights does provide tax amounts. So if there's taxes owed, we'll say, hey, this guy owes $5,000 in taxes, or he hasn't paid taxes in 3 years. He owes, $50,000 on that property. That's going to stay with the property. We'll tell you that in the comments, the title comments. You also want to make sure that there's no federal tax liens or judgments associated with it. So a federal tax lien will hold up a property from being sold for at least 6 months in most cases. And then a judgment on the property or like what we say a lis pendens typically is not going to be a huge issue, but it could be. And so we want you to be aware of what that is. So if, child support could be a lis pendens, could be a lawsuit on the property that would be a lis pendens. So hopefully that answers your question. If you have more questions, again, feel free to ask us in the comments below.
And I see Ram has a question right here. Are bank REOs safer than others? So REOs just stands for real estate owned. That's any property that went to the courthouse steps, didn't sell, goes back to, it goes out and hits the MLS. So are they safer? The answer is absolutely. And the reason why is because they've been vetted out and they're on the MLS, but they're also so much easier to access. They pop up just like a regular retail home. And for that reason, we don't recommend going out and searching for REOs because number one, they're scarce right now. Every home going to auction just about is getting purchased with a clean title. But because it's so much easier and the barrier to entry is significantly lower, you're going to invite in that competition that's going to wipe out any kind of margin that you might have had if you had bought on the courthouse steps.
Yeah, I mean, so back when foreclosures were, when Dallas County had 500 foreclosures and there was 200 properties being auctioned off at the courthouse steps every month, we were seeing a lot more REO properties through some of these outlets, and it was easier to buy with decent margin. Right now, it seems like most of the REOs are going for retail, and so I think when we start seeing an increase in foreclosures, or if you find something, it's not to say that, hey, don't look at REOs, because if everybody stops looking at REOs, then that's your time to start buying them. Again, use Roddy's pre-foreclosure list, use the struck off list. The great thing about using a struck off list for buying REOs is that you know exactly what it went to auction for. So you know what the bank is going to take. So a lot of times you can look and say, okay, 123 Main Street, that's available. I'll go back to my struck off list. Okay, I think I can buy it for a minimum of $200,000. Is it worth it? So it gives you a little bit of leg up, and you don't waste a lot of time researching properties that probably won't have a lot of margin. The other great thing about REOs is that you go through, right? It's actually probably not a great thing. You have to go through closing. So with buying a foreclosure at the auction steps, you give the trustee your cash. They give you a receipt and email you a deed. No title, no closing. There's no expenses associated with that usually. If you buy an REO, typically you're actually going through a normal closing. It's just like going through a normal acquisition. So you have to close once on the acquisition, and then you'll again close or have to go through title again on that disposition. So lots of pros and cons. We probably should do a webinar. If you think that would be a great webinar, put that in the comments below, and we'll definitely do one in the future. Thomas, anything else? Did we miss anything?
I don't think so based on what I'm seeing in the comments right now. But I think in closing, the only thing that I would have to say is if you're interested in Roddy's insights, whether you're in Texas or out of Texas, feel free to contact me directly. There's my information below, thomas@flsonline.com. I'll be the person personally responding to any questions you have. So if this sounds like it's be of value to you, I'll let you know what the pricing is, and I promise you it's worth your time.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. We appreciate your time. If you're watching this after, please, we're always watching the comments, and so put your comments below, and we'll make sure that we respond to them quickly. Thanks everybody. Hope you have a great day.